I'm Steve, joined, of course, by Gary, Keith, and Ron. And guys, we will get to fan questions in a little bit, but I've got a few questions for you before we start. This video game that you guys called was a monster hit. It was so cool for me to watch. I heard from so many different people. What was it like for you to do? Gary, let's start with you. How did the experience live up to what maybe your expectation of it was when you were going in?
Yeah, the first thing you need to know is that I don't think any of the three of us have really had much exposure to video games. I mean, I've never really played them. I may watched my kids play at some point for a few minutes, but never really got involved in them. So I really didn't have any idea just how realistic the game is. And so there were times in the course of the broadcast that I almost got sucked into the idea that we were doing a real game. And then, quirky things would happen that were not realistic, and that would, bring you back to the idea that this was a video game. But, there were long stretches of that game where the three of us were interacting the way we normally do, and we were watching a game and reacting to it the way we normally do. And it felt, if not 100% real, at least somewhat real. And I thought that was pretty cool.
Ron, did you expect it to be harder than it ended up being, or was it pretty much in line with what you thought it would be like?
I thought it was going to be harder. It's funny Gary said that. So it only took 3 minutes into the broadcast for Nimmo not to run to first on a walk that had us a little startled. But I do have to say that I thought it was going to be harder because of what Gary said, inexperience with playing video games. But I think that also helps us in a strange way because it allowed us to have a freshness of approaching this game. I do think that we're going to, if we're allowed to do it again, we certainly will tweak 2 or 3 things. It's like any other process. I think, it was fun talking with the guys, fun being and doing the broadcast, but I think we'll tweak it 2 or 3 different ways to make it more enjoyable for the viewer.
Ron, we heard moments ago that over 1 million people saw it at one point or another, so I'm sure you'll be allowed to do this one other time at least.
Okay.
Keith, what about you? What were your overall thoughts?
I've always been all in the camp of the commissioner's office to speed up the game, but I found it very disconcerting that the time in between pitches was so rapid and inning change. There was no commercial break. We came right back. Pitch by pitch was very quick, and I had a really hard time getting into the flow. And really, because it was sped up like that, I really felt I could not get into a rhythm. But the man right there, Mr. Cohen, was, he's the maestro, and it was like he was calling the game, and we finally just kind of, at least me, I kind of fell into a rhythm and made it conversational.
Gary, what was your prep work like compared to a normal game? And people don't understand the level of prep that you do for a normal game. I would imagine that in some respects, the prep work is more difficult though now, given that you had to learn what happened in games that you did not witness.
Yeah, I didn't really pay much attention to that, to be quite honest. I wrote down some quick notes about the 2 teams based on past history. They gave us the up-to-date stats from the virtual season so far, but I didn't really, didn't really delve very deeply into those because, let's face it, it's not real. So I talking about these players as we know them in real life, as opposed to referring to them in their exploits. So I think the most important thing that happened is that we got to watch the Mets. We got to talk about the Astros and maybe throw a little tweak their way, and that made it feel like it was almost real.
Now, the virtual Mets were not wearing black uniforms, and that has become, somewhat surprisingly, a major topic here over the last, 2 months, but certainly the last couple of weeks as this delay has commenced. There seems to be a real push from the young players on this team to bring those black uniforms back? Keith, we're going to throw it to you to start because you are the fashionista. You're the fashion guru of the bunch. What do you think about throwing it back with the black unis from the year 2000?
Well, if I remember correctly, and Gary, you correct me if I'm wrong, and Ron, is that the Piazza days when they wore the black, they preferred those uniforms. They breathed better. They were better for summer games and day games, and they preferred to wear the black uniform. I don't have an issue with the black uniforms. I don't think they're awful at all. They're fine. There's some uniforms, two-tone uniforms that are I don't care for, but the black uniform, I have not got an issue. Bring it back. It's fine with me.
Ronnie?
Well, it's funny, as I get older, I become less traditional. I wasn't around when they were wearing the uniform. I saw it a little bit when we first started broadcasting in 2006. I think if you're going to do that, take it all the way. I remember in 2008, I did a tiebreaker game in Chicago, the White Sox against the Minnesota Twins. It was called the Blackout Game. And I will tell you, 40,000+ people all dressed in black. It's one of the coolest things I've ever seen. So if the Mets want to do it every Friday night. Have every Met fan try to wear their black uniform or a black shirt or whatever, and call it Black and Blue Night or whatever it has to be to make it fun for not only the players but the fans.
Gary, are we 3 for 3 here? Gary, Keith, and Ron all in favor?
Well, yeah, I never had a problem with the black uniforms, and I think there's a certain amount of nostalgia because, let's face it, 1999, 2000, 2006, those were very successful years for the Mets, and they wore black in all of those seasons. Personally, I preferred the road black uniform. They brought the home Mets black uniform in 1998, and then the next year in 99, they went to the New York block letter black uniforms for the road games, and I thought those were fantastic. To me, that was the better of the two. My quibble came when they started using the two-tone caps, because remember they had black, but they also had those black and blue caps, which I really didn't like at all, and they almost went completely away from the blue caps during that period. So 2012, 2013, whenever it was that they went back to the cream-colored pinstripes as the primary home uniform, and when they brought back the blue caps to wear on a pretty much everyday basis, and that was important. But I think as an occasion uniform, the blacks would be terrific. I like them better than I do for the day games, just because I think the black in the daytime just doesn't work as well.
And anything is better than those player weekend uniforms that we saw this year.
And also, let me also add that the Mets have made some real big uniform missteps over the years. When these guys played those road used with the script New York on them, those were terrible. I was not a big fan of the racing stripes, but the worst uniform fiasco of all time, I don't know if you guys remember this, in 1996, the Mets decided they wanted to go to an alternate cap, and they wore white caps, which they thought were going to be a huge hit, and it made them look like ice cream men. I think they wore them for 6 games before they finally realized that it was just a debacle, and they decided not to wear them anymore.
That's funny.
Once again, you're watching Beyond the Booth Live. We are live on YouTube right now, and we are going to take your questions, so send in as many questions as you want, and we will try to get to as many as possible. Before we kick it to the fan questions, though, one more thing that we thought would be fun, and listen, we said this last week, we don't know how long this is going to go on, hopefully not too long, but we got to get a little creative here if we're going to be doing this every Thursday. So we thought it might be fun to go back and do a little 1986 trivia between 2 guys that played in the games and one guy who probably knows Mets history better than anybody that's ever lived. So we're going to take you back to one game in particular to start. Both Ron and Keith had tremendous games, and we want to see how much each of you remembers about that particular game, that particular performance. Okay, so we're going to go back now to September 10th, 1986. You guys defeated the Expos 6-1 to lower the NL East magic number to 1. Ron pitched 8 innings, 5 hits, 1 run ball. your 13th win of the season. Keith went 3 for 3, a home run, 2 RBIs, and a walk. Do all three of you, before I ask you the questions, remember this game that I'm talking about?
No,
I have
don't.
no idea what you're talking about.
In Montreal? In Montreal?
Don't recall anything about that game.
We're
Was
off
it
to
Montreal?
a great
Was it home or away? In Montreal? Steve?
Flynn. Was it? Flynn is our producer. Flynn, text me. It was a home game. A home
Oh, I
game.
knew
September
it
10th,
couldn't have been Stade
1986.
Olympique. I never went 3 for 3 in Stade Olympique. I couldn't see the ball there. I hated playing there.
All right, so we're off to a rousing start where nobody remembers the game that we're going to ask you
and
questions on.
you have to know from my standpoint, Steve, the 80s are my worst decade because I was out of town,
Right.
so I didn't see a lot of the games in that decade. So these guys, at least, they don't have the excuse. They were there.
Well, I will say this, Gary. We took that into account, and your questions are more macro. Let's put it that way.
Can I
The first
make
question,
one
this
last
is more
comment?
macro.
Stevie?
Yes, yes.
I had so many 3 for 3s with a walk and a home run. I can't remember.
All right, let's give it a shot. We have 2 rounds of this, and if the first round goes horrendously, we'll cut it off after 1.
I think it's
All right,
already gone sideways, Keith, Steve.
Ron, 3 of the
Yes.
5 hits you gave up that day were to the same player. Any
Yes.
guess as to who that was?
Boy, there were some guys in that lineup that wore me out. Tim Raines usually led off. Andre Dawson. I mean, there's so many names. I'm going to go with one of the guys that we traded, Carter, Herm Winningham. Did he get 3 hits in that game? So I remember he got 3 hits against me in a game.
It was
Tim
not
Raines.
Herm Winningham.
Okay.
So now we move on to
Okay.
Gary and Keith with chances. Keith, do you have any idea who it was?
I think I'd go with Tim Raines.
Not Tim Raines. Gary?
Wow. I guess the next guess would be Andre Dawson.
No, it was Mitch Webster.
Oh, boy.
Oh,
Jeez.
okay. Well, yeah, Mitch.
Switch hitter.
Yeah. He liked that
You're
ball. Low ball hitter.
When I
Left-handed.
say the name, Ron, do you say, oh,
Yes.
yeah? Yes, okay.
Well, it's Mitch Webster beat me in Montreal on a Sunday day game. He led off the game with a triple, a ground out by the next hitter. He scored, and the Mets didn't score a run that day, and we lost 1-0 in about 2 hours and 5 minutes. So that's how I remember Mitch Webster.
Got it. Okay, Keith, this is for you. The first inning that day, you guys batted around. You hit a home run in that first inning. The starting pitcher was making his major league debut. Any idea who that starting pitcher was?
This was 86.
September 10th, 86.
Oh, gosh. Palmer, Gullickson.
No,
Was his first name Joe, and was he left-handed?
he was
No.
not.
Wasn't Joe Hesketh?
Yeah, that's what I was
Charlie
thinking.
Lee.
First name, the initials were SV. SV.
SV. Good Lord.
Not very good.
Well, come on.
We picked a winner here, guys.
SV. I have no idea.
Sergio Valdez.
Oh, split finger. I also took him deep at Shea. I took me a wicked split finger down and away. I don't know how I hit it. It was that far outside. And I went out with one hand and I just hit it just right. And I put it in the second tank and down the right field line. Yes, I remember Sergio Valdez. Yes.
So,
Steve,
wait,
the next time we do this, Steve, you have to remember we're 25 games up on September 10th or something like that. So these games got a little bit of a blur.
all right, we'll have to pick a better one next time. Or we're just going to put the kibosh on this whole thing.
That's right.
Gary, so this is the more macro question. You may be able to get this. Which Montreal Expo, since we're talking about a game against the Expos, had the most home runs against the Mets in Expos franchise history? That's not including when they moved to Washington.
Well, my first guess would have to be Vladimir Guerrero.
Vladimir Guerrero is second with 23. He is one behind this Expo. Any guesses?
Tim
Ron?
Wallach.
Nope.
Andre Dawson?
No, you guys know him well.
The kid?
The kid.
Oh,
Gary Carter. Gary Carter, 24. Vlad, 23.
Huh.
Do we
Home
want to
open-
continue? That was one round. Should we
We're
call
awful.
it a day?
We're awful.
It's bad.
Call it a day?
Yes, yeah. Do something else, Steve.
Well, whatever you-
We're terrible.
Your
We're
show.
terrible.
All right, here's what you know what I'd like to do? We were talking before as we were waiting for this thing to get on track, and we saw, by the way, I just said on track. Gary, you and I have had this discussion. We had it last year. You say untracked.
It's two
Correct?
different things. It's
Is
two
it
different things.
It's two,
To
so
get
what is
untracked
correct?
is to get rolling. To get on track is to get going.
Interesting. So untracked is as it's begun?
No, it's working your way to the full speed, right?
That's right.
The season is
Right.
getting untracked.
Got it. So I think we were getting on track. I don't think we were getting untracked.
Okay.
But as we were waiting for this stream to start up, you showed us that when you look to your left during these live streams,
I'm
you got quite
in
the
a-
picture.
I'm in a room that I don't normally spend much time in my house, and I didn't realize this picture was here until I glanced over to the side, and it just so happens, I'll dust it off a little bit because it's pretty dusty. There's our boy Keith, not looking his happiest self.
That's
Keith?
one of my favorite pictures.
What's it from?
What's in? Oh, well, a chest full.
What?
Of,
No. When is it from?
this was when we lost in '85 after 98 wins. This was at the game after, and it was the season was over. That was we came home from St. Louis. I think we came home and played the Pirates, this 3-game series, and we lost that night to the Pirates, and that was the season. And that was a photograph taken after that game, and the season was over. So I just think it captures the, it was a down moment right there.
You look so sad.
I was, but notice the little chest down there and the little, on my lower right-hand corner of the picture, that's my Michelob, but on ice right there.
Right there. Every game, a little bucket with the 3 Michelob lights or Michelobs.
Gary, did you get that signed by Keith after you started working together, or was that from before?
I think that Mike probably got him to sign that as part of the Gary, Keith, and Ron Foundation. It's one of the items that was up for auction. So
Very
I'm
nice.
sure it'll be auctioned off one of these days.
Gary, Joanne, now we're going to the fan Q&A portion,
Okay.
wants to know if you painted those pictures behind you all by yourself.
Absolutely not a art skill. That's an easy one answer.
Who did?
I don't know. I haven't looked at them. You want me to look?
You don't have to look. That's okay.
I have no idea. As I said, not a room I spent a lot of time in.
All right, guys. So Steven wants you guys, and it's a very general question, but he says, talk about the Ray Knight, Eric Davis fight.
Whoa.
Ronnie, you go.
Well, to clear this up, it's not untracked or on track. It's off the tracks. That's what we're doing here, right? So far. But what's interesting about that, the Ray Knight fight with Eric Davis is that, that entire game, the Reds had that game won after the fight had happened. And Dave Parker, I think, dropped the third out in right field that allowed us to tie up the game. But as far as the fight is concerned, I didn't know. Maybe Keith knew. I had no idea that Ray had been a boxer, a Gold Glove kind of pugilist in his day, and that I know that in my own mind, when you run out there and you dive in the pile and everything gets mixed up, and you're worried about not only taking care of business but making sure you don't get cold cocked, is Kevin Mitchell when he entered the fight. I don't know if he was playing left field or whatever. You could hear him coming, and Mitch took care of business every time we had a fight.
I was on first base, obviously, and it was just so spontaneous. And I'm sitting there going, "Here we go again." We got in so many fights that year, and I never was one to go in and start throwing punches. I was always looking there to peacemake, keep guys out of the pile. What I remember specifically, and Ronnie, I'm sure what you'll remember too. It took a long time to break up that fight. There was some tempers, and Ray had that flash temper and threw that, what was it, a short right. And when the fight was over, Dave Parker, who was a monster, I remember on the third base line, Ray's around 10 feet in front of third base, and Parker comes out around 20 feet, halfway up the line, and starts jawing Ray. And I don't want anything to do with Parker. And Ray just said, well, what are you going to do about it? Something like that. And Parker said something back, and he goes, you that tough? Parker said. And Ray says, come over here and find out. And Parker said, that's okay. And that was it. I'll never forget that.
Jeez.
Do you guys feel like part of your success that season was built on some level of intimidation? I understand that this is Major League Baseball, and it's not the normal athlete who will be intimidated at the pro level by another athlete, but the way that you guys carried yourselves, were able to beat teams on the field, and then, physically able to handle yourselves as well. Was there a level of intimidation in your mind going into different cities, playing certain other teams?
Keith, you can handle that one.
I don't think we intimidated anybody, but because we got in fights. I don't feel that way. I will tell you that the teams in my career that were intimidating, because they put the pressure on you on the field, was the Cardinals in the 80s because of their running game, and they were intimidating. They put you on edge. And also the Big Red Machine. I was a young kid that was in my early 20s. They were an intimidating team. Then the Pirates in those 79 years when they won, they were intimidating. But it was nothing about brawn or physicality. It was just that they were intimidating because of the quality of the team that they put out there.
Okay, guys, we've got one more, and then we'll say goodbye for this week. And I'd like to hear from all three. We'll start with Gary on this, but this is from Suzanne, who simply wants to know, what do you miss the most about not being in the booth this time of year?
Baseball is it's a game, and it's for us a job that is all encompassing. I mean, once the regular season begins and till the day that it ends, it is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week pursuit. And you get into the rhythm of that, of preparing for games and doing the games and getting some sleep and getting back and doing it all over again the next day. And you do that for 6 months. And everything that goes into that, the study, the conversations, the camaraderie that we have in our little corner of it, I miss all of it because that's our life. And to be sitting here in the middle of April and not bundling up to go to the ballpark on a cold, windy afternoon that's going to turn into a frigid evening, it just doesn't feel right. And so I just miss the whole totality of it.
For me, I miss the people. The life is very gypsy-like. As you're traveling and barnstorming around from town to town, each town has its characters, people that you're really excited to see, people that come up to talk to you. At home, of course, we have our cameramen and stage managers and audio people and the people in the cafeteria and sitting with our producers and directors before the show and talking about what we're going to talk about on game 140. All of those things I miss. Once the game starts, I think that's the easiest part because once the game starts, you get that adrenaline flow and you're totally into it. And the next thing you know, the game's over. But I miss the people, I guess.
For me, Steve, I miss when you get to the ballpark early and just a smattering of players are on the field. The Mets are the home team, and there's maybe a handful of them out there. There's no music. Where I park, we park out by the trucks over the left field line. I walk in through the stadium. I take the first elevator bank down the far left field line, which I think is the Casey Stengel, where all the Casey Stengel pitchers are. And then I get off on the 5th floor and I walk down the left field line all the way down the left field line to home plate. And that beautiful ballpark, that beautiful field, grounds crews working, you got the sounds of the crack of the bat, and no interruptions. And that is the most fun. It's the most enjoyable walk for me every day I come to a home game. I miss that.
Well, guys, I think we all miss seeing each other on a daily basis and all of those moments. But this little slice here I'll have to do for now. Once a week, 4 p.m. on Thursdays. Maybe next week we'll start at 4 p.m. But we appreciate you all sticking with
That'll
us.
be the first time.
Migrating over to YouTube and joining us in this conversation. So once again, we will be back next week, Beyond the Booth Live. But for now, stay safe and thank you so much for tuning in. For Gary, Keith, Ron, I'm Steve. We'll see you guys next week.
Love the hair, Steve.
Love the hair. Beautiful.
Shaving off for next week. It's gone.
Stay safe, everybody.
Bye.
Stay safe.